Every now and then it's important to point out things that we are quite aware of. For example, that violence against men is largely tolerated and in some cases encouraged. I bring you now the story of the English football star, Ashley Cole, who was a former member of Chelsea. Those of you might be familiar if you're football fans. I'm not, but I had heard of him. Who apparently had had a dalliance with some Playboy star or bunny. And after this, after he allegedly treated her as garbage, the twin sister of this football star walked up to him in a nightclub and hit him 3 times on the chin and the lip, and she had a ring on as well. Nobody stopped her. She just did it. He decided not to press charges, did have a busted lip. Now, what's really interesting are the reactions based off the internet. For example, very cool, I mean, I'm a big fan of you. This is a female cheering on her fellow female. Another female on Twitter writes, "Next time, can it be John Terry, please? You'll be loved by millions." Brilliant pinching that twat in the face. It could not have happened to a nicer person, not lol. "I support you, Carla. The women are not objects. Respect. I love fighter girls. Kisses, pretty babe." That's from a man. Now, I just want to bring this to everyone's attention because it just shows how absolutely acceptable it is to inflict violence upon men, particularly when that violence comes from women. So, once again, the scenario was a wealthy, famous English football player who had apparently bedded this Playboy bunny. Her sister becomes enraged because, her twin sister rather, because her sister, who had been bedded, was ill-treated by this football player, allegedly. But let's rearrange the scenario completely. Let's create a new one. Let's imagine some famous, female movie star or sports star, whatever, who has a dalliance with a male. And then they get married or something, and she cheats on him, treats him like garbage. Can you imagine the twin brother of the male walking up to this woman in a nightclub and socking her in the face 3 times? That just wouldn't happen. And admittedly, due to men's greater strength, the injuries probably would have been greater. But on principle, you wouldn't have seen this. Now, who knows why Cole, the football player, did not press charges? But I believe it's quite likely he just didn't think of it as a big deal. But if a male had assaulted him, he almost certainly would have pressed charges. You see, not even men take violence perpetuated by women against them particularly seriously. This is just the way it is. I mean, what if he had defended himself? Maybe he's a smart guy. Maybe he realized if he had defended himself and hit her back, he would have been in deep trouble. And you can see through the celebrations on Twitter and what have you that this is apparently perfectly acceptable behavior by every measure of society. And of course, this is nothing new. I'm not pointing anything new out to you guys. We've seen this a million times. But sometimes we need to revisit these things to remind ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. For example, why do we not get involved in serious relationships, and certainly a marriage, not Starduskian marriage, but marriage. There's a reason. Because these sorts of intimate relationships with women carry with them incredible risks, unforeseen risks. I mean, who do you think this football player, Cole, had thought, well, this Playboy bunny I'm betting has a twin sister who will exact revenge against me? Probably not. There are all sorts of possibilities and negative outcomes that can arise from something like that. And you, particularly in the West as a male, have all the cards slated against you. You have no advantage in this. If you are attacked or assaulted in a relationship or a marriage, few will believe you, and even if they do, few will take it seriously. And what of the consideration had this woman wielded a deadly object, a baton, a bat, a knife, a sharp object. In that case, in all likelihood, some kind of charge might have been pressed, maybe not, but we all know she would have gotten off with a very light sentence, and perhaps even scot-free. And this is the problem. It's a problem with the system, and it goes back obviously to our biological urges and instincts, the autopilot, the subconscious mind. And we, as a species, as a society, tolerate this sort of thing, but we certainly wouldn't tolerate it coming from a man. And once again, generally speaking, this is why I personally advocate a hands-off policy when it comes to women. We like to think that we know people. But of course, we've all heard that story, haven't we? The couple that had been married for 10, 15, 20 years. And then she turned into something, well, rather different. And then come the accusations of, say, child abuse or violence, none of them substantiated. But even in a shorter-term relationship, there can be such accusations. There can be violence. I mean, years ago, I was together with a girl in my early 20s. Very foolish of me, I have to admit, the reasons, retrospectively. I was together for sex and cooking. Now, you're a young kid. You do stupid things. But she was physically abusive to me sometimes. And I told people about it, and nobody took it seriously. It was just a big joke. What if the reverse had been the case? Well, we all know what the result of that would have been. So, even if you want to pursue a relationship with a female, it's not just the divorce courts or the state against you. It's our very natures. You are at high risk. And despite what some people claim, that you can filter out all sorts of negative behaviors, that you can test them to a T. And I personally advocate testing. Certainly in recent times, I've occasionally flirted with women, and I've issued out tests, but never pursued any of it ultimately. You cannot test to the point where you can predict what's going to happen in the future. The problem is, the loaded gun or not, there are multiple loaded guns. It's the state, yes, it's the dangers of marriage, it's this and that, but it's also our very natures. I mean, this football player got socked in the chin and the lip, busted lip. The woman was wearing a ring. I mean, once again, if he had been assaulted by a man, what would have happened? Charges pressed, almost certainly. He would have fought back, maybe. And people cheer this woman on Twitter. They think it's a good thing. We have a long way to come, and I don't think it's happening anytime soon. And once again, this is why MGTOW is so essential, and why it sometimes is beneficial to remind ourselves of why we're doing what we're doing. Yes, MGTOW is about autonomy, but perhaps even more importantly, it's about personal safety. Safety from an invisible danger, a danger that is unpredictable, that may or may not be there, but the potential for it to be there is always present. That danger of getting accused, the danger of suffering in a relationship from physical or verbal abuse, all of that's there. And no, one cannot filter out all of these potential dangers to 100% degree, despite what some people claim. Whatever common interest you might have, however kind and caring she might seem. And I can tell you, I was together for a long time with a borderline personality disorder girl. I mean, this, in a way, the borderline personality gives you insight into sort of long-term change in people, only it's flipped on its head. An hour ago she loved you, is what I like to say. I remember walking along the Rhine River with her years ago, maybe a dozen years ago, no longer, 13 years ago. I said, well, this is a really nice sunset, and it was. And then, in an instant, the kind, considerate, nice face turned into, well, Mr. Hyde. And she snapped at me and said, "The fuck are you talking about, nice sunset?" Now, admittedly, borderline personality disorder is an extreme case, but it just goes to show that people can change. It's just right up there for you to see much more directly. And people can do all kinds of things, particularly when they feel they're wrong or slighted. The sister of the sister who assaulted Cole did so because she felt the need to exact vengeance upon him. But once again, had the roles been reversed, male assault a female, brother preserving the honor of the brother, no, would never happen. We'd never see that. So as much as MGTOW is about autonomy and, at least for me, the acquisition of knowledge and trying to understand human nature, and make no mistake, this is trying to understand human nature. How does this happen? Well, we live in a gynocentric world and a gynocentric society because we as a species are gynocentric. So this is, of course, part of that understanding. At the end of the day, in its most primal form, going your own way is about self-preservation and survival. Survival against things like this, self-preservation against things like this. Do all women do these things? Of course not. But the danger is always there because the potential exists. And you cannot defend against that because you will be punished if you do that. If you suffer from it and do not defend yourself, you'll be punished for it because no one will believe you. And for many men, there's no way to escape from that. So what do? You go your own way. That's why the hands-off policy is a good one, to my mind. It's always a risk. And in some cases, it might be a risk worth taking. I'm not going to advise against that or for that, but it's just something we need to be aware of, gentlemen, as we continue to go along our own way. Thanks for watching. I will see you the next time. You take care and enjoy the weekend. Bye-bye.